And I'd also heard that you were the president of the Civil Rights Commission in
Yes,
Davenport. How did you get into that?
in in 1967 they started a Civil Rights Commission at the state of Iowa, and they encouraged the cities to start civil rights commissions. So the city of Davenport opened up the job for director of the Civil Rights Commission, and they wanted somebody to run it, so they advertised for. So I put in my application, and after a long time, they decided to hire me. The mayor was definitely against hiring me. He said we hire anybody but that Bill Cribbs, you know. But they finally did hire me, and I became director for 3 years, a little over 3 years, and then I had a chance to go out to Washington as an administrative aide for a congressman. So I went out there with him for 3 years, and then I had a job offer from John Deere, so as the coordinator of their affirmative action programs at their Waterloo operation. Waterloo was one of their larger companies, one of their larger plants. Mm-hmm. So I took that. You know, you go where the money is, you know.
There you go. Which congressman did you work
Edward Mizvinsky. Yeah, he was district congressman for the 1st district here in Iowa. And I think I was the first black from Iowa to go to Congress with a congressman, you know.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh, how neat.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, you know, when just to count back, you know, when I got out of college, I went to work for the post office, and I was the second black to be hired as a mail carrier for the U.S. Post Office in Davenport. The first one they hired in 1918, and they hired me in 1950. Yeah, and
quite a time gap.
Quite a time gap, yeah.
It's almost 30 years.
Well, and before that, I tried to get on the Davenport police force, and that was quite a rigmarole too, because they finally decided they wouldn't hire me. They said you'd be too much expense to the city of Davenport.
Why is that?
Well, they said I had some kind of disease. I went to Veterans Hospital in Iowa City to find out. They couldn't find anything. I went to the University of Iowa hospitals. They gave me a complete physical and couldn't find anything. And so I came back and brought the papers back and told them, and they still wouldn't hire me. But that was just a subterfuge for not wanting to hire any blacks, you know. They've only got a handful now, and the fire department doesn't have any. I remember one day a guy called me up from our dear old newspaper, Quad City Times, you know, and he wanted to know about some of my experiences. And then he asked me, he said, well, how do you feel about black folks getting everything? I said, where are they getting everything? You know, he said, all the jobs and everything. And I said, well, you're down there with a large newspaper that has a large clientele. I said, how many black folk do you have? And he hung up on me.
Oh, no. Pushed him too far, I guess.
Yeah, I asked him the right question.
Yeah, you did. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
You seem very bold and outspoken like that. So why did you become involved?
Why?
With this
because I thought it was the right thing to do. I couldn't see being left out just because I was black. You know, I think that things should have been different. You know, I often think about how things were in the South. You know, even when they had separate drinking fountains. You know, separate restaurants, separate this, separate that. You know, think of all the money that cost, you know.
Would cost a lot.
Yeah, they have separate everything, you know. Yeah. Yeah, I can remember one time somebody telling me that when they had the separate drinking fountains in the South, that they seen a dog drinking out of the white only fountain, and they wouldn't let black folks drink out of it, you know. Well, the North wasn't much different. They just was more settled with theirs. They were, because some of the housing was just outrageous. Yeah, I seen one house one time had the basement divided up with blankets, and each one of those divisions was a room for people to sleep, you know. Yeah, one house we found had 17 people in it and only had one bathroom.
Yikes. So do you think that you still would have gotten involved then if you hadn't had the experiences like at the restaurants and the ice cream parlor and stuff?
Oh, I think so. If things were different, you know. Because, you know, when they'd come see us play football, or they wanted you on the track team, you know, they didn't make any difference then, you know, so I couldn't see why anything else should have to be different, you know. And it still is. You should find a lot of people that don't want you living next door to them, or don't want you in their neighborhood, you know. They think everybody's bad, you know. When I say that all blacks are not bad, you know, and they seem to think it is, you know, I say, well, what about Michael Jordan, you know? Oh, that's different. That's different, you know. Well, that's the way people think, you know. Just take somebody to speak up, that's all.
Exactly.
Speak up, they wouldn't have that at all.
Is the housing market then really that bad now for black people? Like, have you recently been looking for a house or something and experienced that, or was that?
Did I have an experience looking for a house?
Because you were talking about how even today they were not wanting you to live next to them because you were black.
I've talked to some realtors, you know, that have said that people don't want black neighbors, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I know that. It hasn't been that I have looked for one that I've been turned down, but I've talked to realtors that have said that people don't want black folk living to them. But I think if you got the money and the means, that you ought to be able to live wherever you want to live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can afford the neighborhood, then why not?
Yeah.
And chances are, like, if you're moving into a wealthy neighborhood too, then you have a good job and you're relatively respectable too. That you.
I can remember. Oh, can't remember what year it was, but it was in the 70s. Mm-hmm. When a young man wanted to buy a house over in Moline, and he couldn't buy it, and he got one of his Caucasian friends to buy it for him and then sell it to him. So that's the way they worked around that.
It's a loophole, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to get around it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you became involved in a group more so than by yourself.
Yeah, NAACP was the catalyst, you know, rather than trying to go it alone. It's been a hard job to go alone with people backing you up, and when you go to a meeting you could take 2 or 3 people with you. It made a lot of difference, and you just going along. Because the first thing was said, you're the only one that's complaining.
Do you believe that your work helped in the long run?
Oh, I know it did. You know, I can. You know, when you see the fruits of what has happened, you know, down through the years, you know, it wasn't just me alone, but it was, you know, because Martin Luther King was kind of the catalyst that started things rolling, you know.
He did.
And once he had things rolling, then the rest of us in the little towns just came along and kind of magnified what he said, you know, and it made all the difference in the world. Yeah, because when you got a guy like Martin that could speak like Martin, we had Martin here in 1965.
Oh, did you? Were you guys the ones who brought him in?
The Catholic Interracial Council brought him in. Catholic Interracial Council gave him the Paz Materis Award.